Welcome everyone to episode number 11 of the Average Ontario Angler podcast. Some people say that number 11 is important, like oh, you make a wish at like 11:11 and all that junk.
I wish that Andrew would start making this interesting.
That's your job this episode with the interesting fishing fact shortly.
Oh yeah.
So today's episode is about shore fishing.
Shore fishing.
So this is truly for the average angler, because I know for a long time we fished out of canoes, and before that we fished from shore. Yep. Most people can't afford a boat. The average angler doesn't own a bass boat or have the funds to own a bass boat or even have a vehicle that will tow a bass boat.
Or a salmon boat or any large boat.
So this is for, again, even people who own boats may want to go shore fishing. There are some things which it's better to do shore fishing than on a boat, in my opinion.
Oh, 100%.
So we're going to be going into some of the benefits of shore fishing, or some of the tips to be a successful shore angler, and kind of what species we would recommend you target, what gear you'd want to bring for different purposes, and kind of where to start your process of going shore fishing. So I also want to mention, before we get too far in the episode, we have an awesome sponsor for this week.
Yeah, one of the biggest giveaways that we've ever had on this podcast.
For sure. So his hat is actually right here, which is part of the giveaway. It's Wham Baits. So Wes hooked us up, or hooked you guys up, whoever wins, with about $200 worth of gear.
$200 worth of gear.
It's a big giveaway.
He brought the giveaway over to my workshop a few weeks ago and handed me this box full of plastic baits, and I picked it up and I was like, holy smokes, it's literally full. How many bags?
25 bags.
25 bags. And we're talking like, we're going to go more into this. But
yeah. We're going to talk
frogs,
about it.
Sankos, everything.
Everything I would use. And again, if you're a shore angler, you can fish these things from shore. These are the deal. This is what you're going to be, using and successful fishing with. Stuff just like this.
And if you're listening, listen to this. That's all the bags.
That's Jesse's version of ASMR, but fishing inspired.
Yep. But it's a huge giveaway, and we'd like to thank Wes for that. But we're going to get more into that later.
Yes. So our next point is going to be the interesting fishing fact, where this week it's Jesse's turn. He's going to do a hopefully research fishing fact. I know I have done one in the past which wasn't, but I'll leave you to figure out which one that was. It's not hard. So Jesse, give us your interesting fishing, or your what's the term here? Give us your fishing fact.
All right. So this interesting fishing fact, it's more of information that you may find interesting. And it's going to kind of be not a debate, but me and Andrew are going to kind of talk about this. He has no clue what I'm going to tell him, but we're going to kind of debate a new product that's coming out.
Okay.
And I'll hear your thoughts on it. So you may have seen advertisements or branding for Mercury's new Avator 7.5E. Electric outboard motor. Okay, looks pretty cool.
Yeah,
if you've seen pictures of it. For the last year, they've been posting little teasers here, like, oh, the new future of electric motors is here, and it's a slick looking motor. Mm-hmm. You may think, oh, that's cool. Well, what's it all about? So I did a little bit of research on it. Now, right now, currently, it's not available. They've had it at the boat shows this spring, and a bunch of YouTubers got to test it out. But at this moment, I don't think you can actually purchase it, but it's supposed to be coming out this year, I assume.
All right.
So again, for more than a year, they've had this prototype and they're talking about, oh, how good it is. But this is the research that I found. So it's called the Avator 7.5E. Now, to be clear, they also have two other models that they say are coming out as well. And the largest of the two is actually a 14 horsepower equivalent. But the 7.5E, now you may think 7.5, that's 7.5 horsepower. That's not. It's called the 7.5E because it's 750 watts of power. So it's not a 7.5 horsepower. It actually has similar power to a 3.5 horsepower four-stroke. So that's the difference. Now this thing, it runs off a removable 48 volt, 1 kilowatt lithium battery, and it uses what they call, I think they made this up, but it uses transverse flux technology.
Great Scott!
Now, what does that mean? No idea. It didn't explain it at all. And if it did explain it, it went way over my head. But I was thinking, I was like, what's so special about this motor? Because if you've known anything about electric motors, there's several brands already that have had electric motors out for years. Mm-hmm. Think of Torqeedo. They've been making electric motors for years. And then ePropulsion, they've been making them for years too. This may be the first large company that's made a very,
a successful motor company that's now branching into the electric.
Yeah. So say a company like Mercury, who's making this motor, they've been making motors forever. So obviously they have a lot of funding for research and development. So maybe this possibly will be a lot better. So Mercury claims that the design of this one is designed this motor to be the most efficient. Hydrodynamics have the best propeller for efficiency and high torque to maximize the battery life. So everything about this motor they claim is designed to maximize the battery life, because we all know battery powered stuff, like you can buy lawnmowers now and power tools, everything is cordless or battery powered. But what happens? You have to maximize the technology so that the battery actually lasts, because if it doesn't last, what's the sense, right?
Yeah.
So we'll see. Again, like we said, they're a large company. Obviously they have a lot of research and development, and this has been in the works for years. So maybe it's a lot better than the other ones. We won't be able to tell until people start comparing them. But what can you expect from this motor? Say you decide to pick one up, the Mercury Avator 7.5E. You may wonder, how fast does it go? Now, again, this is a 3.5 horsepower equivalent, so don't expect this to have a 9.9 power.
Yeah.
So they claim on a 13-foot boat at 100%, so you're going full throttle in this thing, it can go 100%, which is about, I'm guessing from the reviews I looked, looks about 10 to 14 kilometers an hour. It depends really on a lot of factors. It can go 100% for 5 miles or 1 hour. So full pop, you're just cranking that thing. You're going for 1 hour straight. That's at 100%. If you know anything about batteries, you'll know that if you drop down to even 80%, the range goes significantly up.
Yes.
And if you go down to 50%, the range is a lot more.
Yes.
So instead of going 100% for 5 miles, you can actually go 34 miles at 25%. Now, at 25%, you're probably only going 2 or 3 kilometers an hour, so it's pretty slow. So you might think, is it worth it, right? So specs of this motor: weighs 43 pounds without a battery. Now, the battery itself is 15 pounds, and it's removable.
Yeah,
a lot of the
you
other
can carry them separate.
Yeah, so you can actually buy, have an extra one, pop it in.
Yeah.
So 43 pounds without a battery, that's actually 5 pounds more than a gas motor. You can see where we're going here. We're going to kind of compare like the pros and cons of getting a gas motor or getting an electric motor.
Yes.
Now, you may say like, 5 pounds is not a big deal. And I'd love to have a battery powered, motor. I wouldn't have to, do any maintenance. You wouldn't have to buy gas. Gas is expensive. Now, here's the thing that, like, when I was looking to get a motor for my Sports Pal canoe, I actually looked at Torqeedo motors. And the main thing that turned me off them is they're so dang expensive. So I did a little shopping, and I could buy a brand new Mercury 3.5 horsepower gas for $1,300. There's no pricing on this Mercury, but I kind of looked at similar motors that are the same, horsepower equivalent, and they're all about $4,000.
Wow.
So you're paying 3 times more for an electric motor. So I think this will be the more interesting thing for maybe a minute or two. Me and Andrew can kind of discuss this. So like, what would you say, like, what are the pros? Like, say you do actually get this electric, because I mean, there's a niche of people that actually want this. Yeah. What would you say the pros are?
So pros would be, another benefit I would say to an electric motor is, because it's not running on a gear ratio system, you can have that throttle at very little. So you could use, essentially, if you had a 100 horsepower equivalent electric motor, you could troll with it. You could just have it on very low power, and it could spin at such a low revolution, you could troll with it.
Yeah.
So it would vary on, again, the back of your Sports Pal right now, you have a gas and electric motor on the back of it.
You could do both.
You could do both with just the one motor. Yep. So it's a lot easier. It's not a lot, but it's going to be easier for setup, and you're not having to switch and lift one motor up, drop the other one. You have your trolling motor and your main drive all in one. So that's a big plus.
That is a plus. And I'll say one con is, like I mentioned, it costs 3 times as much. Now you may think, like, you know what, I'm not buying gas, but let's be serious here. Like, gas isn't that expensive compared to spending 3 times as much on a motor. So
because how much gas does a 3.5 horse
exactly
use in a day?
So they'll say on their reviews, like, oh, the Mercury 3.5 has a built-in internal gas tank, just like my little 2.5. Yeah. And they're like, it holds 1 liter of gas or 1.5 liters of gas, and that will last you an hour of driving, the same as the battery.
Yep.
But the thing is, as soon as that battery dies, if you only have one battery, because to buy a spare battery, they're a lot. They're not like a few $100. They're like almost $1,000.
Yes.
So I can buy another liter of gas for like $2, $1.50, and I can buy a little tank of gas and fill it with, maybe 4 or 5 liters and be good all day. There's no way I'll even come close to that with the electric. Once it's dead, it's dead. That being said, on a normal fishing trip in a small boat, are you going to go more than, 34 miles at 25%?
No. If I was going to a cottage, like if I had a cottage, or one that I would rent frequently or something like that. A lot of people have their regular destination they go to. This would be a great option because you're coming home to a place that has power. You can charge it every single night. You're ready for every single day, and you're not going to run out of it. If you have to, you fish really hardcore in the morning, come back, charge your battery during lunch, and then head back out. So it depending what you want to do. But if you want to do interior camping like we do, and you're camping for 5 days, you need to bring a lot of extra batteries.
And you may say, "Oh, well, you can charge it with a solar panel." Believe me, you need a huge solar panel, and it would take you days to charge that thing. Now, to add about that battery charger, they actually have 2 different chargers. You can get a regular charger, which takes about 10 to 12 hours, and then they also have a fast charger, which charges this battery in 4 to 5 hours. So like you said, you could go out fishing in the morning, come back to the dock, plug in the charger, and in 4 hours, it's at 100% again. Yeah. And generally speaking, like at your cottage would be great because like there's no way you're going to use the full range of that battery in the day. No. If you're going places where you have to drive far, this battery is not. The battery technology, it just isn't there yet.
Yes.
It's not sold for me. I'd say one other thing is people are like, well, the electrics there's zero maintenance on them. That's great. It's just like a lawnmower, right? Like we a few years ago got an electric lawnmower and the thing's fantastic. Super powerful. It's amazing. No maintenance whatsoever. In the spring, you open the garage and you slap the battery in and it's ready to go. You don't have to do any maintenance on it.
Yeah.
But is that zero maintenance worth the cost of spending 3 times as much for the initial product? Because, we do our own maintenance on our outboard engines.
They're not hard.
They're not complicated.
No. And again, doesn't say it, nothing can go wrong with your electric either. No. Like, you hit a rock with that, you're going to need to replace a prop. You're going to need to know how to do that. You can still bust off the skeg. You can still have, electrical issues with it. You can still have issues. If you're not taking care of it, because you think no maintenance means you can trash it, you're going to have issues with whatever you buy.
That being said, I feel like electric motor technology is pretty stable. Like if you bought a well-designed electric engine, it realistically only has one function to spin. That's it. Like I know they're more complicated than that, but generally speaking, it should be pretty straightforward for maintenance. Like it should be literally no maintenance as long as you're not, like you said, an idiot.
Another big plus for it, and I could definitely see this being a huge selling feature, is it's quiet.
Yes.
And there are lakes, more so down in the States, but there even are lakes around here where it might be private property all around, and they have lake rules. Everyone in that area has agreed there's no gas power, there's no boats more than this size or whatnot. So if you have an area like that, or you just you like being where it's quiet and you hear nature all the time, an electric motor would be awesome.
If that's your only option, like say you lived in the middle of nowhere and there's only one lake, like in Arizona or something, and it's an electric only lake, to go fishing, you're going to have to spend more money. That's just the way it is.
And
so
this
like electric is your only option.
This would be the entry level for you, and it would work great.
100%. But I feel like with motor technology, the performance is there. Just how long the batteries last, it's a turnoff for a lot of people.
Yes.
And whatever we know, like I remember, like we both work with tools for a living, right? Remember NiCad batteries?
Yes.
NiCad batteries at the time, they were legit. They were awesome. But you know what? They didn't charge when it was cold. They didn't charge when it was hot. They didn't last long. And if you let them drop below a certain thing, they wouldn't charge. Remember? And then lithium came out. And lithium was like huge. But there's, pros and cons to lithium too. I feel like the next technology that's coming out, I feel like lithium is almost peaked as to what it can do.
Yeah.
I feel like the next thing that's going to come out, whatever it is,
cobalt batteries or something.
Exactly.
Like
that will be the game changer. As soon as they can tell me that there's going to be multiple hours on an outboard instead of 1 hour, then I'm all ears. But I thought it was interesting because it's something that maybe you're listening to this and being like, that's ridiculous. I'd never spend $4,000 on a stupid little electric engine. But there's probably someone that's like, you know what? That'd be great for me.
It has its place. Yeah. That's the thing. For us, it made sense. Again, for you and you bought yours, made sense to go with gas. Yeah. For me, it made sense to go with gas. Someone else, it might make sense to go with electric. It has its place. I'm not going to diss it. I think it's really cool to have these options out there. Exactly. I would rather see this out there and just me personally not buy it. I'm not going to get mad because they made it or someone else is excited for it. That's awesome. Yeah. It's cool technology.
Now, if Ontario banned gas motors, which they wouldn't do,
I'd be livid.
Then we'd have to get this. But I thought that was interesting because
and the purple beast would have to go. That just can't happen.
That's fine. But yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see down the road how these motors do and the actual price point of them. Again, they're not going to be inexpensive. They're going to be pretty pricey, but it'd be interesting to see. I mean, we like seeing new technology, like trolling motors. Even like you said, it's quiet. Sometimes when you're just in the canoe with the trolling motor and you're just kind of gliding along fishing, it's amazing. The same thing with these. They're quiet.
Yeah.
That's cool. But anyway, that's the interesting fishing fact. It wasn't overly interesting, but if you're interested in getting into fishing and you want to buy a little motor, an electric engine or motor might be an option for you. So you can definitely check those out.
All right. I'm going to give you a number rating this time.
Oh, okay.
Well, we have to rate the interesting fishing fact.
Be nice.
Listen, all you Jesse people, this is the real deal here. Real deal.
Remember that one that you said you didn't prepare and I still gave you a decent mark? Okay.
Yeah, because I'm really great at off the cuff stuff. What are you talking about? So I would say I liked that because it's a timely topic, because it's something new and exciting. So I would say, I don't know, B+.
I'll take
B+.
that. I'll take that.
It wasn't like riveting. It wasn't, as fun as Squirrel Tales.
It wasn't as fun as Squirrel Tales. Speaking about that, I just want to add something about that. So I posted a little clip of that onto TikTok, and I got all these people being like, "Why are you so squeamish talking about Squirrel Tales? What are you, a bunch of hipster yuppies?" I was like, I'm a hipster outdoorsman. He called me a hipster fake outdoorsman because I don't eat squirrel.
And if he had listened to the podcast, he'd hear that I said I have, and it was good.
Yeah.
So eat it.
Yeah. But anyway, we like seeing comments like that because they're actually pretty funny. And then we just block the people.
Yeah, Jesse always like, look at this dummy. We laugh. It's great. Send more. All right. So now on to our main topic for the day, or for the week, I guess. So shore fishing. What would you classify as shore fishing? What comes to your mind when you hear the term shore fishing?
Like fish or just anything?
Like what version of shore fishing comes to your mind first?
Oh, when I think of shore fishing, I think of when you're driving through the Kawarthas maybe, and you see people just along the side of the causeway or off the docks or off bridges fishing just right from shore. Easy peasy. Yeah.
For me, I think the first thing whenever I think of shore fishing, it's fishing a pond, because I'm not going to drop a boat in there, unless it's really good. Then I might try to, but generally I don't drop a boat in a pond. But I still want to see. I'm curious to see what's in it. I'll fish it once just to be like, yes, this has bluegill, and I'll never fish it again.
Yeah.
When people are starting out in shore fishing, or again, if you're just looking for extra tips, there's multiple shores. Like we often think of like a standing body of water, like a pond or a lake. But creeks and rivers, all of that is shore fishing. Anywhere where you're standing on land and not on a boat is now shore fishing. And it doesn't always have to be like, I'm going for bass. I'm trying to do what guys do in a boat, but it's from shore. You can make it your own, and you can make it superior to fishing from a boat at times.
For sure. There are definitely advantages over fishing from a boat sometimes.
And there are advantages to being in a boat sometimes. So again, there's pros and cons to everything. So one of the first tips that people will say is like, or they'll mention when they're talking about fishing from a boat versus from shore is, I'm sure you've heard this before. It's like, why are guys in the boat? They're always fishing towards shore. Like you have the whole lake. Why are you fishing shoreline? It's because it's a great way to target fish. That's where a lot of the structure is. All shoreline structure is on the shoreline. So boaters have easier access to an entire shoreline. But when you're fishing from shore, you have to contend with the trees that are around, private property lines, like what you can actually access, drop offs. Like you can't fish like off a cliff effectively, or at least can't land anything off a cliff.
Yeah, or off a tall bridge.
Yeah, so there are advantages to a boat in those instances, but when you're fishing from shore, the biggest thing is to look for structure. So if you went to, and this goes for anything, like if you're fishing a stream or lake or pond. When you're shore fishing, what are things you're looking for to cast towards? Because just like if you're in a boat, you're casting towards that dock or that pocket in the weeds or that sunken log. Like you're fishing individual pieces of structure. So what do you look for when you're fishing from shore?
Generally, I'm looking for areas of shallow water that get deep. Myself. Like I feel like there's always, not always, but fish are oftentimes shallow. But areas that are just shallow for big, vast expanses oftentimes don't hold a lot of fish. If there's shallow water where fish come up to feed, but then there's a drop-off that goes into deep water, there's probably going to be more fish in that area because the fish can go up and feed, and then, if it gets sunny, they can drop back down into the deep water. Or if, birds there, they can drop back down into deep water. So I don't want to just look for, like, shallow water. I want some depth.
Yeah. Same thing, like when we're fishing in the boat, we'll sometimes going, oh, that bay looks like awesome. And when we get up to it, we see, oh, it's 6 inches deep.
Yeah.
And we'll just leave. Like, we're not going to spend our time on it. Same thing from shore, like you said, looking for specific areas. I know for me, like, when I'm walking from shore, because you're going at a slower pace, I like it because I can really pick apart whatever I can access, I can pick apart. So if I see like a fallen tree and it's like, yeah, it's shallow, but there is like a tree in the water, and normally I'd pass it up because, yeah, I really want to get to that spot over there. But in the meantime, I'm walking by, I'll stop, I'll take 2 casts at it. 100%. And sometimes I get surprised, and that's where you're going to land a fish because everyone else maybe overlooked that spot.
Yeah.
So it also depends as well what you're fishing for. So if, like, this is kind of like what we were talking about, would be great for bass fishing or for sunfish or something like that. They relate a lot to shoreline structure. But other species which are great to fish from shore are like stream trout, are carp. So think about what you're fishing for, because with carp, they can roam around. They'll have their feeding areas. We had our carp episode. We're not going to talk much about carp specifically, but you're not going to be looking for carp like, oh, there's a sunken tree there, but there's carp nearby.
Yeah.
So keeping in mind of what you're actually fishing for is going to help. But thinking of, again, in standing water, yeah, like stick around structure, drop-offs, things like that. Keep an eye out. Wear polarized sunglasses so you can see. You are focused primarily on visual when you're shoreline fishing, I find.
Yeah, you 100% need polarized sunglasses.
You don't have electronics. You're not fishing a shoal in the middle of the lake. You're not finding that stuff. You need to see what you're casting at, pretty much.
Yeah.
That being said, when you're fishing in a creek, a lot of the time you can't. Sometimes, especially if it's been raining or whatnot, the creek can get super muddy, or even just stained, and you can't even see perhaps that there's a log or there's a snag or there's a rock, whatever. But you can actually read the surface of the water. So becoming adept at being able to read the surface of the water in a creek, in any moving water, you can see, I can see by that swell there's a rock there, and fish will hold in behind that rock. And that goes for if there's trout in that stream. That goes for if it's closer to the lake, bass will come into these creeks, and even small creeks in the summertime. Bass will come in, and you can target them. Why not?
Yeah,
people aren't doing it. Like,
not a lot of people.
All the creeks and stuff flowing into the Great Lakes. Guys are interested in the trout that come out of it in the spring, and the salmon in the fall. And
then after May, when most of the steelhead are gone, these guys don't come back to the creek till late August, September, when the salmon are up. And those summer months, there's actually bass in a lot of these creeks, and we've had our fair share of good days catching decent bass on light tackle, trout tackle.
It's fun. It's really
fun. And they're generally fairly easy to catch. Yeah, like, because they're in there to feed.
So one thing I wanted to talk about with shore fishing, I brought it up earlier, no trespassing. So we've when you're walking a creek, you're walking kilometers in a day, or you go to a lake and you're trying to like walk the shoreline. So there are rules that are in place that you can use to your advantage, so that you have access to different areas. But there are some areas of private property where you could say, well, the law is this, but there's a bylaw, or there's a private property sign, like, you can't fish here. It's pretty obvious. If there's no trespassing, you can't go there.
Yeah.
Don't do it. If they call the police, you are trespassing on that person's property. Now, there is a Navigable Waters Act. So if the body of water can be traversed with a canoe or with a boat, you're allowed to walk along that water edge, or in the water. If you're wading through it, you can do so. So if you wanted to walk around the whole perimeter of Lake Ontario, you could. It's all open. I mean, maybe not cross the border, but but you can walk around that. So even when you're walking certain rivers, you can do the same thing. But when it becomes really shallow creeks, it's not a navigable water. So there actually are laws where you need to get permission to be on that farmer's property to fish that creek. Now,
even if you're in the water,
there
are exceptions, unfortunately.
Yep. So, and again, I didn't know that for a long time. I thought any water is just, I can walk through it.
Because I did some research on this because someone asked me, and apparently you're probably going to get into this, that some properties, they can actually own the land under the creek.
Yes. Again, if there's a no trespassing sign, don't just give up and head home. If you're really want to fish that, if you're local or something like that, and you're respectful. It's a big thing, is being respectful. Take out your garbage. Don't leave anything stupid. Don't be breaking things. But if you can knock on the guy's door and just respectfully ask, hey, I'm just wondering. I see the creek there. I was wondering if I could walk by your creek, or I saw there's a pond in the back 40. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind if I walked in and tried fishing that. Sometimes they'll say, yeah, no problem. Sometimes they'll be like, no, get off my property. You're like, okay, fine, and you walk away.
I have a story about that though. So
yeah, go ahead.
I was up searching for a new trout creek a few years ago. And again, a lot of the trout creeks that I grew up fishing with my family for literally decades, they're all posted now. You can't fish there because the neighbors that moved in, the new neighbors, new houses. So that's annoying. Like creeks that I fished my whole life since I was 5, I can't fish there anymore. It's all private property, unfortunately. So anyway, I'm looking for new creeks, right? And I found this creek on Google Maps, and I'm just looking, but you have to, sometimes you got to drive and just check it out yourself. And sometimes you'll drive all the way up there and private property, you can't fish it. So I'm on the side of the road near this bridge, and I'm out of my car and I'm just looking at my phone, looking around, and this guy pulls over and he's like, hey, are you lost? And I was like, no, I'm looking for a trout creek. I just don't know really where to access it. And he's like, oh, this is all my property. It's no trespassing. And I was like, oh, okay. I'm just looking, fish for a few hours. You know anywhere around here that I could fish? And then he's like, you know what? You can fish this spot. And he drew me a map on a napkin. He's like, park here, fish down here, and just don't leave any garbage, and don't tell anyone. Like, don't tell your buddies. I was like, no problem. And I went down there and I had a really good day for a few hours. Nice browns. And then I lost the napkin, and like, I didn't want to go back anyway, cause I didn't have permission again, but there are people that if you're nice, like you said, you ask them like, hey, I'm just here to fish. I don't litter. I'm not going to break anything. Yep. So a lot of these properties, they're closed because, especially in early steelhead season, people are camping out, people are leaving garbage, people are breaking stuff on their property, and of course they're gonna make it known.
Oh, this fence is in the way of me walking by this creek. I'm gonna like cut the fence. The guy's trying to keep his sheep in the field. Like,
yeah, or I've seen people, they'll actually like cut down trees.
Yeah.
Or cut down branches that are in the way.
This is not your.
That's against the law.
You can't be cutting down and trees and stuff like that, no matter where you're fishing, unless you own that property.
Yeah.
And don't be affecting that.
And then cut down trees and then be shocked why the place gets closed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are, you have to use common sense.
So again, that's kind of like a little bit of something that we would like it if we could access more areas.
Yeah.
I'm sure anyone listening would like, I'd love to fish areas that maybe they were open before, like Jesse said, that you fished before and can't. And unfortunately, because of a few bad eggs, it's been ruined for everyone.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So again, like this is just a good outlet where we can just say, hey, like you can be responsible. You can, if you're polite to the person, you might get access. You might be able to fish these areas. Mm-hmm. But you have to prove yourself to be a responsible adult.
And that being said, I get a ton of people ask me like, where do you trout fish? Where do you trout fish? And like, there are a few spots that we fish, and getting a trout fisherman to tell you their trout spot, it's super hard because, a farmer may say, I'm fine with the odd guy fishing, but as soon as multiple people start showing up all the time, they'll close it.
Yep.
That's why trout fishermen are very close-lipped, and it is hard to find these creeks.
100%.
So, you have to put it. I know people hate when people say this, but you got to put in the work. You got to put in the steps.
Yep.
You got to, do your own research and find these creeks, and then just keep them quiet to yourself, or else they will get ruined.
Now that's for creeks. There are a lot of areas with creeks, but also with ponds, with small lakes and whatnot that are in nature areas, like parks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So you can have like a big one by us is like the Ganaraska Forest. Is a huge area in the Kawarthas. And just north of Port Hope and stuff like that. And that area, there's a lot of, it's all public access. They have walking trails and hiking trails. It's great just to go for a walk. And in areas where there's bodies of water there, you can still fish them. It might even say conservation area. You have to take note now, some conservation areas you can't, and there are regulations, there's posted signs, no fishing. But there are conservation areas where you can 100% fish it. And so that's a great area where you can walk, and you can walk around the whole pond edge or walk around the lake, and you can get access. But another thing too is if you don't have an area like that where you have the time to drive up north and go find a spot like this, you can oftentimes go to piers, or oftentimes public.
Yep.
Certain times it might be closed. You can go to certain marinas, certain ones, or public boat launches. You can fish from the shore there. Again, anywhere there's public access, even parks on the side, sometimes there's pretty good fishing out in front of these parks. Yeah. And people aren't there because, they don't want to go fishing with people playing soccer behind them. But guess what? There might be some, like a 3-pound bass sitting right on the other side of those bulrushes.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. You can catch some surprisingly nice fish right in the middle of everything.
100%.
And also, I'd say provincial parks too. Although you have to pay to get in, it's, you bring the family, and they oftentimes have an area for fishing.
Yep. And another thing too is to make things a bit more accessible. If you get yourself a pair of waders, you can not only now more easily traverse these creeks. It's sometimes the trail will cross the creek if you're walking on the side of a creek, but you can also wade through or further into kind of a marshy area on a shallow bay off a lake or something like that. You could, if you're wearing waders, you could walk right out past the bulrushes and start casting from there.
Yep.
So you've just now opened up a whole lot more area that you can fish besides just, I can only go where I can stand in my running shoes and not get wet. You're very limited as to what you can access.
And oftentimes there's a lot of shallow weeds right around the shore. So if you can walk past them or get past them slightly and cast beyond that, like you said, it opens up a lot more of the fishable range.
Yeah. And again, if you're getting 10 feet further with your cast, that might be where that drop off is out there that you want to hit. Or that might, again, you're limiting your last 10 feet of the cast that you're going to get snagged all the weeds with your treble hooks. And now you can fish like crankbaits and get down deep. So waders are a great option. Not just for stream fishermen, but if you want to fish from shore, they're a great option for people to get a bit deep. So let's talk a bit about gear then. We always recommend a run-of-the-mill general shore casting rod, but we'll try and narrow it down. A lot of guys, if they're fishing for trout, it's a light action rod or medium light, depending on what you're doing. It doesn't have to be too long, but generally it's just a nice small spinning rod. Medium light, I would say, would do you for anything, especially if you're getting around a bit of log jam. You can have a bit of pressure to pull out the little native trout and stuff that are up there.
I used to use a lot of ultralight rods, but then after a few heartbreaks of actually hooking some 20-inch browns, you're oftentimes better off with a light or a medium light with slightly heavier line.
There's a couple creeks that we'll go to, and I go there with a 6.6 medium action spinning rod because I'll drop like an egg sinker because it's fast current with like big log jams, and I'll drop an egg sinker down there, like almost drop shot it, like power shot it with these little like worms and stuff like that, and I'll catch like a 10-inch brown or 12-inch brown, and then like set the hook, and I'll just I'm walking out on these logs, and I'll set the hook and just like lift the fish out of the water, and just like walk my way back across the log to land the thing. But again, like I couldn't do that with a lighter rod.
No.
But if you had a rod like that, you can do anything with it. Shore fishing, you don't have to have really any super specialized gear for most things. Yep. Even if you're going for bass, you can use your regular bass setup. Again, if you're fishing from shore, I would go with something maybe a bit heavier. Like we always recommend a 7-foot medium heavy. If you're going for like largemouth, will do you for anything. But if you're fishing shore, maybe you go a little bit lighter, maybe a medium.
I'd say like when I worked at the fishing store, if someone can only have one fishing rod and reel for everything, it's going to be a 6.6 or 7-foot medium power spinning rod, a fast action. Yeah. I mean, like bait casting rods are nice, but for total versatility for casting small baits and larger baits, a medium can do it. If you're fishing more for bass and pike, I'd probably jump up to a medium heavy. Yeah. But really a medium can do everything. It's the general purpose rod. It does everything. 100%. I mean, like you've caught, how many fish have you caught on mediums that are way bigger than the rating? Like,
Well, for a long time, I had one rod that was my go-to rod. I used it for everything. Yeah. It was a medium.
Same with me.
And
remember?
I still have it.
6.6 medium with a 2500 Shimano on it. Yep. You can do anything with that.
Yep.
Now, again, you may not be able to flip through lily pads and
I still tried.
But, you'll quickly realize why fishermen have more than, one combo.
Yeah.
What?
So if you were fishing, let's say focused on bass for a bit then. And again, like shore fishing is such a broad subject. Like to really narrow down a lot of like helpful tips if you want to go shore fishing for bass, we have to do a full episode on shore fishing for bass.
Yeah.
Or shore fishing for pike or for walleye. You can fish for almost any species. So some of the big ones I would say would be carp, bass, pike, sunfish, and catfish.
And walleye guys, like right now, like fishing around the locks or fishing like in Bay of Quinte right off the shore, you can catch really big walleye.
Yeah, night fishing for walleye come into the shallows to feed, so they're accessible. But I would say your two fish that you're probably at an advantage to fish from shore would be carp and catfish.
Oh, 100%.
I'd say I'd almost always fish those from shore rather than my boat.
Yep. Although I think it would be pretty fun to catch them in a boat.
I said almost always.
But I think one of the fish too that most of the season you can have a pretty good success with is bass.
Yes.
Just because they're so prevalent in shallow water around the shoreline.
Yeah. Sunfish are again super easy to catch when you're in a from shore or from a boat, but it's just because they're so shallow. So if you're fishing a dock, you can drop a bobber off the edge of that dock. that's super busy with a bunch of boats being launched, you'll still catch sunfish.
Yeah, they're pretty dumb.
So if you're taking a kid fishing, something like that, sunfish is a great thing just to have something you're going to get bit at the end of the line.
They're willing participants.
But bass fishing is fantastic. So if you were going fishing for bass, we'll do a couple scenarios. Let's say like a pond, and then we'll say like a big river or a deep lake, like Kawartha style lake, where you have, Muskoka style lake. So it's like deep rocks and stuff like that. What would you recommend for your bass fishing? So let's start off first with like a pond. So your more weedy areas, what would you recommend using for your gear? What gear would you bring, and what lures would you use?
Okay, so one bait that I feel like if you're fishing shallow bass that anyone can catch fish on, and it's versatile, and you're not going to be, snagging all the time on weeds, is a Texas rig.
Yes.
A Texas rigged plastic bait. And I know like a lot of people think, oh, you need heavy gear to do that. You don't. You just have to use specifically slightly thinner hooks than a big flipping hook, for instance. Like you can still use Texas rigs with a spinning rod if that's all you have.
And you can get you can still get a 3/0 EWG, but get the finesse.
Get the thin wire ones. There's some hooks will be called the super line hooks or the braid hooks, and those are the thicker gauge hooks that are designed for fishing heavy cover with stiff rods and big line. Then you can get the standard hooks, which they're slightly thinner. They're not weak. You might bend them out on a heavy rod, but on a regular spinning rod or a medium heavy bait casting rod, you're fine.
Yeah.
Baits that, again, a bait that you can't not use for anything is like a stick bait. So we're going to kind of plug our sponsor here. He's giving us, well, he's not giving us.
This is an amazing assortment of stuff.
We didn't get anything. If you're listening, Wes, all these baits we're giving away to one fortunate winner who wins this. But
it's almost like he knows by showing us all these, we're going to want to buy them ourselves.
We're going to buy some. So he has this bait called the Woblin, and it's a 5 1/4 inch. It's a stick bait. It's like a Yamamoto Senko or Yumdinger. It's a stick bait.
Yep.
This is not a mold that everyone else has. This is a very unique mold. It actually has like a bulbous area in the middle where the hook goes in, and these actually have a little bit of stretch to us. Remember at CanCast, he was showing us how far they actually
I don't think
stretch.
they're sealed. We'll open that up and I'll give a bit of a stretch.
Don't break it, because
I won't break it.
So if you win this, one of these baits is going to have Andrew's smell on it.
So this one here, these are 5 1/4 inch,
which is a pretty standard
but
size.
again, like they have a good stretch on them.
Yeah, they're not Z-Man.
No.
But at the same time,
but yeah,
they have a little bit of durability there to them.
Like there's other ones where you do this with like let's say a Yamamoto Senko. You just crumble in your hand.
Yeah.
So they have some nice stretch on these. So they're going to hold together when you're fishing cover, even with this. Or there's panfish around pecking at it. They're not going to just tear that off the hook super easy.
For sure. And like, again, like we were saying, Texas rig, but also like a wacky worm stick bait, like these Woblins, wacky rigged, fish that around anything. But if the cover's slightly heavier, definitely plastic worm like that one here.
You can
What's
do
that worm
Texas
called?
rig. This is called the 7-inch Patriot.
So it's a ribbon tail worm. Put that on a 3 to 5/0 worm hook.
Yep.
With a bullet sinker above it, maybe like, an 1/8 or a quarter ounce, depending on how heavy the cover is. And literally just pitch that around logs, lily pads, docks, stumps, anything like that.
Don't worry about what you're casting over unless it's like in the air. But like
don't
anything submerged, cast over it.
Yeah.
And you can just like slowly reel this thing in, and those tapered weights, they come in, they just roll off everything. You can bring it right through a tree, and if you Texas rig that properly, your hook point is not exposed at all to catching anything. Like it just is such a streamlined presentation.
And it'll make its way through weeds, logs, anything like that, and they're easy to fish. Fish it like it's live bait. Let it sit on the bottom. Give it a little bit of twitches. Let it slither through. Like imagine it as being a living thing. And bites are pretty. Sometimes they're subtle, but a lot of times you'll just feel tap. A tap. And sometimes you'll feel nothing, and your line just shifts to the side. So
That's
just
the best.
make sure you watch your line. And again, if I'm using Texas rig, I'm generally going to be using a bait caster, a 7-foot, 7.3 medium heavy, but you can use a medium heavy spinning rod would be good as well. But you could get away again with the 6.6 to 7-foot medium.
I Texas rig like 99% of the plastics that I throw. So you can actually Texas rig from the front end of a stick bait, cast it out, and it'll still quiver. It won't be exactly the same, but it'll still like drop down, quiver, and then you can just pull it right through the weeds without getting it snagged on stuff.
I think a lot of beginner anglers, they feel like you can only use stick baits wacky rig. And like Andrew said, I rarely wacky rig them. I actually Texas rig them.
Yeah.
Because they're much more weedless. They come through cover better. And again, they don't have the same action, but the fish still love them.
I got a story about the first time I wacky rigged a stick bait. Jesse and I were fishing a pond, actually. We had the canoe in there, actually, because we knew there was some bass and some crappie in it. So anyways, we're fishing these stick baits, and he's like, I'm getting upset because I had mine wacky rigged. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, I Texas rigged mine. So I did the same. And I'm like, how do you fish it? Just being goofy. I'm like this. And he just started like trolling it behind the canoe. And guess what? Nailed a bass.
Yeah. It just it's a subtle action, and it works. Who knows what it imitates?
Yeah.
It could be anything. I have another quick story. I was canoeing with my wife, who doesn't really fish a lot. We wwere fishing a weedy Kawartha Lake, and I was like, what bait do we put on? Because like really, my wife, she can't like, flip a bait under a dock or beside a log. It just has to be something she can cast out and reel in. So I put on a 5-inch Senko, or like a stick bait, and Texas rig, and I just was like, here, chuck that around the weeds, let it sink, and then you'll feel a bite. And it's funny because she doesn't fish. I'm like, it has to be something easy. And she was literally not even casting. She was just dropping it in the holes in the lily pads as I was paddling. And all of a sudden she dropped it, and I just saw her rod just go zoom, and it went underneath the canoe. And she's like, I snagged on something. And I'm like, is the snag moving? She's like, yes. I'm like, that's a fish. And it was a nice largemouth. But that just goes to show you, a stick bait or a Texas rig bait, deadly.
Yep.
And from shore, you don't want to snag. Yes. So like Andrew said,
I don't even like snagging from a boat. Whenever I'm fishing around weeds, I'm generally fishing weedless.
But at least in a boat, you can get your lure back. If you're from shore,
it.
if you snag, you're doomed.
So another thing too is if you can use a topwater frog imitation, so a cast and retrieve frog. Again, a good example is the Wham Baits Whamphibians. These things have amazing action. If you wait and you rig this weightless and you do a constant retrieve, this like ripples across the top of the water.
Yeah.
It looks really good. So I would Texas rig this weightless hook. It has enough heft you can still cast this easily on a bait caster, 100% on a spinning rod. And again, this is if you're from a boat, you're fishing shoreline weeds. We're casting weedless frogs into shore, bringing them out. Well, how did the frogs get out in the water? They're going to be going back. And naturally, frogs that are out in the water
swimming back
are going to be swimming back.
Yeah.
So you're not at a disadvantage to fish frogs the opposite direction across the same weeds.
And I would say fishing a frog in a lot of lakes that are really weedy. Now, if you're listening to this and you're from like Northern Ontario, this may not have the same situations, but if you fish down here, if you're fishing in the northern states or wherever, there's lots of weeds along the shoreline. Sometimes the only thing you can cast is a topwater weedless frog.
Yes.
There's so much scum and cheese mats and lily pads and slop. Like there's nothing else you can cast. You have to cast something that skims atop the surface, and the bass just come up out of nowhere and just explode on it.
I've seen bass come out of like what seemingly as shallow water they couldn't have fit in.
6 inches sometimes.
Like it's ridiculously shallow sometimes. So if you are fishing from shore, again, as a general rule of thumb, whenever you're shore fishing, be cautious of how you're stepping. Don't be stomping around your shore, because as we talked about before, those vibrations travel really, really well underwater.
Yeah.
It transfers instantly into the water, and you'll spook fish. So if you're fishing from shore and you can even in clear water, sometimes creek anglers, you have to actually stalk up to the river edge because they'll see you. But again, if you're fishing like heavy cover on shore for bass, let's say, don't prematurely raise your lure out of the water and take it away. Because I can't tell you how many times I've had a bass blow up on me when my rod is 6 feet long and I just reeled up to the rod, lift up, and there's a bass just went for it. Mm-hmm. Like, drag that thing onto shore if you want.
Yeah.
Because they'll come right up and nail that thing. And they might be waiting for that last second when they have to make that split decision of, I can either attack this now or it's gone because it's too shallow. And I find sometimes that itself is a deciding factor for these fish, and they'll sometimes hit. So make sure whenever you're shore fishing, especially if you're fishing cover and you can't see what's in the water, bring it right up real shallow, because you might be surprised as to what's going to nail it right there.
And I think another tip along that lines is don't walk right up to the bank and just immediately cast far.
Yeah.
Make a few casts right in front of you first, to the side, right in front, because like Andrew said, sometimes the fish are right there. Remember? Okay, here's
I'll make
an
a
example.
few casts. When I approach a bank, I'll make a few casts, just flipping it out like 10, 15 feet, but I'll stand like 7 feet back from the water's edge. Just because I don't want to spook if anything's nearby. Because there's so many times, even at the cottage, I would walk along the river and you'd see bass, and as soon as you tried to get close enough to the bank,
boom,
they're gone.
Yeah.
But if you can cast, and you're 10 feet away from the bank side, and you just flip out to the water's edge, they'll hit it.
And another thing, don't constantly just stand on the shore and cast straight out. Sometimes turn to the side and cast parallel to the bank. along the side of the bank, because again, there's lots of bass along the side. I was going to say an example would be of how shallow bass can get. I remember talking to a guy that fishes a lot of bass tournaments, and he said to me about largemouth, as long as their back is wet, they're happy. Yeah. So you can catch bass in 6 inches of water. Remember that time we went camping in the canoe, and I was sick as a dog, and we went out and we were casting weedless frogs onto shore, pulling them into the water, and bass would explode on them. Because if we casted in the shoreline, we were spooking bass.
Yes.
You'd cast near the shore, maybe 5 feet from the shore. Your frog would hit the water, and boom, a big wake. The fish would spook. So what we did is we actually casted the frogs onto the shore or into bushes, and then pulled them out gently and landed them in the water and let them sit. And just the first twitch, boom, fish explode.
You know what we call that approach?
The natural approach.
The supernatural.
Supernatural.
It's like the frog just crawling in, or he cast onto the dock and then dropped the bait in like a spider falling off the dock.
and when the water's slick, calm, and it's early in the morning, sometimes, that's the deal.
Yeah, 100%. And I like what you said. I had it written down too, to mention covering water when you're fishing from shore. Let's say you have one access point and you have like a 10-foot area to stand or a 5-foot area to stand and to cast out onto the water. Start casting from left to right across the whole way, and cast a foot away from your last cast. Foot away, and you just keep casting, moving, a couple degrees every cast you make, and cover that water. If you can't see structure itself that you want to pick apart, that's the only way you can do it. You just cover as much water as you can, fishing from one shore 180 degrees to the other shore, as much as you can cast. And that's how you're going to get more results, because you are going to be limited in where you can fish. So wherever you have access to, pick that place apart, like every inch of that thing.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to mention, a bit of a story, was fishing docks. So at our cottage, there's a small floating dock. It's about, like 6 feet by 6 feet.
Yeah, it's not huge.
It's not huge. It's on top of 4, big rain barrels. And so when you stand on it, the dock will like shift and float around like a fair bit in the water. So what I was doing the one time, I had on a crankbait, and I would stand at the back side of the floating dock to lift the front end of the dock up, and then I was flipping the lure underneath the dock I was standing on, and I was nailing rock bass. And again, like if you're fishing on a dock at around a marina or a public boat launch, and again, don't be smashing against boats and flicking your bait into boats and getting tangled and being in the way, but guys are taking their boats around looking for docks to cast to. You're standing beside one or on one. It might be docks nearby. Pick those apart. Fish it. Don't overlook the structure that you might be standing on to fish.
Yeah, it's true. Because bass and a lot of species, they go right, especially on pressured lakes. Sometimes they just tuck under those docks, especially when it's really bright outside.
Yeah.
They don't have, again, I always say people, fish can't wear sunglasses. They got to hide under something when it gets sunny. They either go deep in the weeds or they go underneath lily pads or docks.
Because how many times have we gone to launch the boat? We go to the public boat launch. Every single time, one of us, while the other guy is, taking a leak or, unloading the boat.
Andrew slips away, makes a few casts.
And now that I have the boat, then I have to park the car just to make a few casts. So we take turns for whatever we're doing.
Sucker.
But we'll always take some casts at the boat launch, mainly because we're just excited to get fishing for the day.
Yeah.
But more than a few times, we've caught something doing that. Yeah. And this is like a public boat launch that's oodles of people around, and we can still catch a fish there. It's not as high producing spot location. It's not a hot spot by any means. But again, if you're limited in what you can access, go where you can and just have fun and make the best of it.
And I'm not saying you should target boat launches, especially when they're busy.
Yeah.
But here's another reason why a boat launch might be good. If you fish a lake that has tournaments on it, here's what happens. These guys and girls catch fish. They load their live wells up. They come back. If it's like a buddy tournament or an actual tournament, they come back to the boat launch. They weigh their bags. And where do they throw the fish back? Right at the boat launch. They put the fish in the water. And those fish generally are going to stick around that area for a little bit, if not indefinitely.
They did studies, and I think it was they don't move, more than 3 kilometers from where they're released. Like 75% of the fish don't go more than a kilometer away from where they were released or something. Yeah.
Smallmouth wander, but yeah. Which is true. So like if you're fishing, like I know there's one lake that we fish where oftentimes I'll see the guys dumping the bass in, and that area where they fish, oftentimes I catch a lot of fish right in that area.
And a lot of the tournament guys launch their boat, and what do? Immediately rip away from the boat launch.
Yeah.
They go to the other side of the lake.
Yeah.
They're not fishing. There have been tournaments won by people where anyone can join, have a derby or whatever, and guys are in the boats, they rip across the lake, and the guy who wins was fishing 100 feet down from the boat launch from shore.
Yeah.
Like, that has happened.
And I don't know if you're going to cover some other lures.
Yeah, so we'll go into a bit more bait. So even let's step away from the soft plastics then. And I know there's like tons of great options.
We'll talk about more about this in a bit.
Yes. Yeah. But hard baits. Where are you fishing from shore?
So
we already talked about weedy areas. So let's say you're fishing a bit more rocky area.
Yeah. So for instance, baits, again, we're talking, you don't want to get snagged.
Yes.
Baits that don't snag. So for me, a square bill crankbait.
100%.
Square bill crankbaits, they often call them the 4x4 of lures, because you may think, oh, it's got 2 treble hooks on it, it's going to snag. But the way that it dives with its square lip, the hooks are actually above and behind the bait. So as you're reeling it in, it kind of like hits over anything. You can literally reel it over logs.
It's designed to bump into the structure on the bottom.
So square bill crankbaits, like, they got the Strike King KVD 1.5.
The classic Cotton Cordell square bill.
Yep, the Big O. One of my favorites is the Rapala BX Brat. I've caught a lot of fish on that one. And they're great. You can cast them out. I'm not saying you won't get snagged, but they are fairly snag resistant.
Yes.
Another crankbait that I would recommend is a lipless crankbait.
Yep.
And the reason for that is they're very versatile. You can fish them at any depth. So say you're fishing a deeper area with a big drop off and you don't even know how deep it is. You can count that bait down. They sink 1 foot per second. Mm-hmm. So you can count it down. And maybe the first cast, you let it sink 10 seconds. So it's 10 feet down. Nothing. You make a few casts at that. The next time you cast, you let it sink 15 seconds. And so on until you get to the depth where the fish are biting. Yep. So that's another cooler. And
again, the lipless cranks, they also run not the treble hooks hanging down, but they almost run almost vertical. So again, they're behind that lip. I got my old Rapala that I still have. The second lure I ever bought is a Rattling Wrap, like the blue Shiner, whatever it was called.
Classic.
And the lip on that, I fished that thing around so many rocks because again, when I was growing up camping with my parents, 80% of the fishing I did was from shore because my dad, you're hanging around the campsite. We weren't in the boat all the time. Mm-hmm. And so the lip on that thing is like the nose
to heck
is pure silver now.
Yeah.
And I'm just beating against rocks. Like that thing.
And that
I've gotten it
triggers
snagged. But when I was a kid, I went in, I swam for it, and I got it back.
Yeah.
But again, I fished that thing. The amount of rocks I bumped that into versus the amount of rocks I snagged was an insane ratio. Like it doesn't snag very much.
For sure. And another bait I would add that's good for a lot of species, spinnerbait.
Yep.
Spinnerbaits, because of the arm that holds the blades, they're fairly weedless and woodless, I guess you could say. You can cast them right in logs and bring them through. Yep. Again, they're not snag proof, but they're pretty good.
Another crankbait or jerkbait, anything that is a floating diver.
Yeah.
So even if it is a deep diver and you cast out and you're like, oh, I'm using a 7-foot deep diver, but it's only 4 feet deep and you bumped into a rock and you're pulling and it's snagged now. Just drop your rod tip, give it slack, count to 10 slowly, and that bait will just slowly like float up out of that area,
hopefully
that crack in the rock. And it happens a lot. And then you start retrieving again, it's loose again, you're good to go.
Yeah.
So anything that floats, that can help a lot because it will hopefully work its way out of a snag.
Exactly. And again, if you're using, say, a suspending jerk bait or maybe a count-on Rapala, something like that, that bait's hooped. You're not going to get it out. So something that floats is a good option.
Yeah. There are lure retrievals, which again might be a good option for you. They're heavy weights that you hook onto your line if you are snagged, and you shoot it down into the water, and it'll knock your bait loose. So they do have those. They're not 100% either.
Yeah.
So if you do that, they generally have a rope on it. You can retrieve that, so you don't lose that at least. Mm-hmm. But that is another option for you.
I mean, it really depends on the spot you're fishing, what you're going to fish for. And, there's so much information about shore fishing on YouTube and the internet and stuff. Yep. So really one thing that we do, like we fish a lot. We're not pros, but when we're looking to fish somewhere, we do research ourselves.
Yep.
Like we're going to go on YouTube and be like, how do I shore fish, or like, how do I fish for muskie from shore in this situation? And generally there's going to be a video or something like that on there. So one thing I would say is before you go shore fishing, even if you know how to catch that particular fish, but maybe not in that situation, do a little bit of research and it may, pay off very well. Cause like sometimes you'll go to an area and you're like, you know what, the fish, they were here a month ago. It's just too bad you didn't come a month ago, and you're like, oh, dang it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just have to do some research. The fish may be in different areas, different times of the year.
And times of the day.
Yeah.
And yep.
So a little research, or maybe hopefully you have some friends that you can ask, but if not, there's lots of information out there.
100%. So we want to talk again about wham baits.
I thought that we could just look through his basics. So
yeah. So by talk about, I mean, just like, let's just on air look at this stuff again because it's good.
Okay, so we met Wes at CanCast, the CanCast Fishing Show, which is one of Canada's largest fishing shows. And the cool thing about CanCast is they have a lot of smaller local bait makers.
Yes.
And we've come to know a lot of them. But Wes, we were talking to him a lot on Instagram before, but when we finally met him, I'm like, this guy's really nice.
He is. Like, he's so nice that he put together a $200 value giveaway to give away to one of you very fortunate listeners. Like, this guy is nice.
And we're not being paid to say this either. We actually bought his baits. And again, he didn't give us any of these baits. So if you're watching this, Wes, you know my address. But we actually bought a few of his baits. And I'll tell you the baits that I personally bought at CanCast and why I picked them. So we were talking about the Wobblins. I actually picked up 2 packs of those.
Yep.
Again, stick baits are like, every company has a stick bait. I like when I see companies that have a slightly unique variation and the maker can explain why that is an advantage.
Yes.
And Wes did that. So I actually picked those up because, like, honestly, like, how many bags of stick baits do you have?
Because these here, what's cool about them is because they have that bump in the middle, you can trim this to whatever size you want. So you can cut that dead center. Now you've got 2 Ned rigs.
Yeah.
Like, it's
versatile.
Yeah. Or it's almost like a small paddle tail or knuckle tail on it when you cut that. Like, you can modify this, cut it however you want, and now you have a different bait. You can fish a different way.
Yeah, 100%. And the other bait that I actually bought is, he has these craw baits, and it's a mold, again, that I haven't really seen anyone else have. Because, like, a lot of bait makers, you look and they all have the same molds, which is fine because, like, everyone has their own variation of colors and how they market it. But he has this one called a crosher. It's a craw. It's a 3.5-inch bait, and it actually it floats. It has a floating craw, so the craw stands up like in this defensive mode, so it looks very natural to the fish. And I bought this particular color he's giving away is like a purple. It's called brown grape. He has very interesting colors that are pretty cool. He's like the colors that color shift.
Yes.
Very cool.
Yes.
But he also has a lot of very natural colors. What about that? That looks pretty cool.
This is the 3.5-inch called Taxman. And it's a drop shot rig or Ned rig, but it's pretty finesse. So I would say it's a very good drop shot rig. Yeah. This is the tangy melon color. That looks sick.
And you know what?
I like that.
He probably called that the Taxman because it's a leech.
Yeah. So yeah, like this, like one hook, small hook, finesse hook to the nose, drop shot. I love the narrow profile of that, and that's just gonna like undulate in the water like really, really well.
And there are several packs of those.
Yes.
So again, there's 25 packs of baits. Like, there is a lot of frog baits. There's a lot of flipping baits. There's worms. There's stick baits. There's drop shot baits. Like, if you win this,
there's a rocket. That's a pretty cool flipping bait right
there. So I actually bought 2 packages of those because I'm a big flipper.
Yeah.
And it's a very unique mold. It's a flipping bait. It's going to be a good punching bait because it's very compact. But it's got these little flappers on the sides. So it's going to do a little dance as it goes down. So I'm excited to try these. But yeah, you know what? Yeah. It's
and the
so hard not to buy baits all the time.
I feel bad because I saw them online, like Wamphibian. I'm like, yeah, I want that. And I saw the videos he was posting about it when he first made them and stuff like that. And I completely forgot that Wham Baits has the Wamphibian, and I didn't buy them. And I'm like, I really want those now. Yeah. I forgot. So
I got a bag.
If you're listening, Wes, that's going to be my order that I want from you. Is
I'll give you one of mine.
Ooh, there we go. Good deal.
And then the last bait I want to talk about, he has this bait called, it's a 4.5-inch. It's called the Taker. It's a flipping bait. It's like a beaver style bait, but instead of 2 beaver tails on the back, or like the one split tail on the back, it has 2 big curly tail like grub legs.
Yes.
That thing flipped is going to be sick.
Yeah.
But you know what? All these bait makers, again, a lot of them have the same molds. Some of them are unique. They all have their different takes on different colors that work, or different, ways that they make it, or densities of plastic. So they all are different, and they all catch fish.
Yes.
So find someone like Wes who's super passionate. Just to mention too, Wes just passed 1,000 followers on Instagram.
Yeah.
Which is a big deal. I'll tell you, the first 1,000 is the hardest for sure. And he's a guy that you can tell he puts his blood, sweat, and tears into this.
Yeah.
And again, he's a normal average angler. He has a full-time job, and on the side he does this. And like,
and
know,
he makes good baits, like 100%. This is a good giveaway.
You don't these aren't the kind of baits, like they're in professional packaging. These aren't the kind of baits where you look at and you're like, oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
You're like, I want to use
like,
that.
Oh, here's some Ziploc baggies of stuff I made, you know?
Yeah. And again, like we said, we partner up with sponsors for the show of companies that we ourselves purchase. We're not getting paid by Wes. He's literally donating this giveaway for our listeners, which is great. We're not getting compensated for this, which is exactly the way we like it right now because we're not BSing you.
Yeah, we like to give the people we like to give them the opportunity to have this stuff and that's what we're looking for from our sponsors, is to get that engagement. People that have a love for fishing, that are average anglers, that want to be able to try new things, want to be able to use this stuff, and the companies out here that are being able to sponsor our giveaways are doing just that. We're not getting anything extra from it right now. We're just being able to give that to the winners. That's what we want to do.
And we're hoping, even if you don't win, that now if you've never heard of Wes at Wham Baits, check him out on Instagram, check out his website, check out his YouTube channel, check his baits out. And you know what? If you want to support a local Ontario bait maker, buy a few bags from him. You know what? When you buy something from, say, Yamamoto, no one cares. Yeah. When you buy a pack of baits from a small bait maker, they do a little happy dance. Yeah, it's a good feeling.
And actually, there's a good point. So from May 15th to June 15th, Wes actually, he said, we're doing a promo with us. So 15% off any order over $15, which you go there, you're going to buy, 3 bags of plastic. You're already over $15 or something like that. Yep. So you don't need a whole lot to be able to make use of the promo. The promo code will be announced on our Instagram. So Average Ontario Anglers on our Instagram. That's where that promo code is going to be announced. And it will be active from May 15th to June 15th.
And if you don't see it, just shoot us a message and we'll send it to you.
As well, the winner of this giveaway of all this stuff. So again, it comes with 25 packs of assorted baits, and not just like overflow colors. Like he put his top-notch colors in here too.
Yeah, legit colors you'd actually buy.
Yeah. And again, awesome Wham Baits hat. He also got I believe it's a size large shirt.
Yeah, it's like a Huck, or I think it's a Huck.
Yeah, it's a really nice fishing shirt.
Yeah, and it's a Huck sun shirt.
Yeah.
Which is really nice.
Yeah. So all that is going to one person. Again, that giveaway, the winner will be announced on our Instagram. So stay tuned for that. Make sure you follow and get the post notifications for the stories so that you'll be able to, when the time comes, be able to mention it and actually get a chance to win this awesome giveaway.
For sure. And literally, if you win this, be a nice guy or girl and give 1 or 2 bags to one of your fishing buddies, because even if you fish all the time, 25 packs of baits is going to last you a long time.
Yes.
Like 100%. This is literally like $175 worth of baits right here.
Yeah.
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 So
it's a lot.
Yeah, I buy that on an average Tuesday, but that's okay. So anyway, we love working with companies like this that, they're from Ontario, we're from Ontario, they're average anglers, so are they. And, they're passionate about what they do, we're passionate about what we do, and that's what we like to do right now. So best of luck, I guess, winning this giveaway. But if you didn't win, again, we have the promo code, buy some stuff anyway.
Yeah, you're going to love this stuff. So yeah, definitely check him out. If you see anything you like, message him, get it ordered.
Yeah, and just some news. So we'll have this new part at the end of the podcast called "What's New." Ooh. So
this is the first I've heard of it, so it's very new.
It's new, okay. So we get a lot of messages actually on our Instagram. People are like, "Oh, we listened to the podcast. It's great." We actually just passed our 5,000 downloads on for our podcast. That's not including our YouTube
YouTube views on it
as well. Yeah. So we actually just passed 5,000. That was with 10 episode. We're really happy that it's going that well. We were expecting, realistically, I did research on what to expect when you start a podcast. How many views are you supposed to get? And we're getting literally 5 to 10 times more than that. So we're pretty happy with that. So we thank you for the support.
Yeah. Thank you for listening and following, subscribing. If you get a chance again, you're listening to a podcast now. That's why you're hearing this voice and Jesse's voice. But you can find us everywhere for our podcasts on Spotify, Apple, on Google. And
pretty much everywhere. They're all up.
If you have the opportunity, please, we'd love to get a review from you.
There's been a lot of reviews, and if you've given us one already, we appreciate it. If you'd like to support us, please give us an honest review and a comment, and we read them every
subscribe,
every week.
Set up auto download, all that stuff. That just helps for other people to be able to find it. So if you're enjoying it, by doing those things, that helps it get pushed so that other people can also see it and hopefully they enjoy it too.
Yeah.
So we really appreciate that.
We appreciate you. And again, the more reviews and downloads we get, the more we're able to get bigger giveaways coming up with bigger brands. Which
our
giveaways,
if anyone's been paying attention, they've been getting
better.
And
guess what?
Bigger and better.
They're getting better in the future too, and I'll tell you that. But that's a secret.
Yeah. So the more we can get that, the more we can pass on. So that's what we love.
Yeah, for sure.
So thank you again for listening to episode 11 of the Average Ontario Anglers podcast.
I remember filming episode 1.
Yeah.
And now we're at 11. That's
it feels
crazy.
like a year ago.
Yeah. It literally was like last month.
Yeah. So thank you very much for all those who are supporting us by listening to us, by following, subscribing. You can check us out on our YouTube, our Instagram, everywhere. We're at Average Ontario Anglers. Definitely check out Wes from Wham Baits. He's at Wham Baits on Instagram, I believe.
He's on YouTube as well.
So
and there's a link to his website on his Instagram.
Yeah. So 100% check that stuff out. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.